The Whitmore Manor loomed over the English countryside, like a relic from a forgotten era, its spires clawing at the grey sky. Nestled on the edge of Eldridge Village, the 18th century estate was a labyrinth of stone and shadow, its ivy-choked walls hiding secrets older than the oak surrounding it. Locals whispered of curses, of ghosts that lingered in its halls, but to the Whitmore family, it was home, a grand, decaying one, heavy with history and dust. The air carried the scent of damp earth, and the windows, tall and arched, seemed to watch the world with hollow eyes. On this autumn evening, as clouds swallowed the last light, the manor felt more oppressive than ever, as if it sensed what was coming. Henry Whitmore, a scholar in his mid-40s, sat at the head of the dining room table, his blue eyes sharp behind spectacles. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture rigid, a man anchored by logic despite the manor's eerie weight. His wife Eleanor, 38, moved with quiet grace, her auburn hair catching the candlelight as she served dinner. Their children, 12-year-old Edward and 10-year-old Clara, sat opposite each other. Edward, restless and curious, poked at his food, his mind on the attic discovery he'd made earlier, a hidden compartment under a loose floorboard, stuffed with yellowed letters. Clara, quieter, her wide eyes darting to the windows, seemed to sense the night's unease. The staff, Jameson, the stoic butler, Mrs. Hargrove, the cook, and maids Lily and Anne hovered in the background, their presence as familiar as the manor's creaks. The dining hall glowed under a chandelier, its candles casting flickering shadows on ornate wallpaper. Henry spoke of medieval architecture, his latest obsession, while Edward interrupted. "Father, did you know great-grandfather Whitmore was in a secret society? I found letters in the attic." Henry chuckled, dismissing it. "Old tales, Edward. Focus on your studies, not ghost stories." Clara's voice was small. "I heard footsteps last night, Mama. In the walls." Eleanor smiled, though her eyes flickered with unease. "Just the house settling, darling. Old places like this have their noises." As they ate, Jameson entered with a decanter, pouring wine for the adults before retreating to the shadows. Outside, the wind howled, rattling windows and stirring the garden's leaves. Unseen in the woods beyond, a figure moved through the underbrush, cloaked in black, hood obscuring their face. They were a phantom against the trees. In their gloved hand, a sharpened blade gleamed faintly. They'd watched the manor for weeks, learning its rhythms, the servants' paths, the family's habits, the weaknesses in its ancient frame. Their breath was steady, driven by a purpose that had simmered for years. The Whitmores, unaware, savored their last moments of peace. After dinner, the family moved to the drawing room for tea. The fire crackled, but the air felt heavy. Edward fidgeted, eager to explore more, while Clara clutched her mother's hand. Henry sipped his tea, discussing a possible trip to London to lift Clara's spirits. A thud echoed from the attic, sharp and unnatural. Henry frowned. "Probably a book falling. I'll check." He grabbed a lantern and climbed the grand staircase, its banister worn smooth by generations. The attic was a maze of trunks and forgotten furniture, the air thick with dust. His lantern cast long shadows as he scanned the room. A trapdoor in the floor caught his eye, slightly ajar. Kneeling, he peered inside, seeing only darkness. "Strange," he muttered, closing it. Below, Eleanor drew the curtains, but a shadow flickered outside, gone when she looked again. Her pulse quickened. "Henry," she called, but the manor swallowed her voice. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hargrove washed dishes, humming, oblivious to a shadow passing the window. Jameson polished silver in his quarters, and the maids Lily and Anne prepared for bed. In the woods, the intruder reached the manor's perimeter. They scaled the ivy-covered wall, landing silently on the gravel path to the side entrance. The servants' door was locked, but a thin wire in their hands worked the keyhole until it clicked. They slipped inside, the door closing without a sound. The manor's warmth enveloped them, scented with polish and dinner's remnants. Their eyes adjusted to the dimness, tracing paths they knew by heart. They'd studied blueprints, stolen from a distant relative's state, revealing the manor's secret passages, tunnels built for smuggling or escape during turbulent times. Now, they were the intruder's veins through the house. In her bedroom, Clara stared out at the garden, catching a glimpse of movement among the trees. "Edward," she whispered, but her brother was across the hall reading. Shaking her head, she crawled under the covers, heart racing. Edward, meanwhile, sneaked into the hall, drawn to the attic's mysteries. The intruder navigated the passages, dust swirling in their wake. Cobwebs brushed their cloak as they moved toward the pantry, where a hidden panel led to the kitchen. Their steps were silent, their purpose clear. They paused, hearing Henry's footsteps overhead in the attic. A smile curled beneath their hood. The game was on. In the drawing room, Eleanor's unease grew. She paced, glancing at the walls as if they might speak. The fire's warmth couldn't shake the chill in her bone. Upstairs, Henry descended from the attic, puzzled by the trapdoor but dismissing it. As he reached the staircase's midpoint, a scratching sound, like nails on wood, came from within the walls. He froze, lantern trembling. The family reconvened in the drawing room, nerves frayed. "Something's wrong tonight," Eleanor said, her voice tight. Henry nodded, checking the locks again. Edward and Clara, sent to bed, lingered in the hall, whispering about the noises. In the pantry, the intruder emerged from the passage, steps silent on the tiled floor. Mrs. Hargrove's back was turned as she dried a plate. The blade glinted, poised to strike, but a pot slipped from the counter, clattering loudly. Mrs. Hargrove spun, gasping. "Who's there?" The intruder melted back into the passage, heart pounding but undetected. The noise roused the house. Eleanor rushed to the kitchen, finding Mrs. Hargrove pale. "Just a pot, ma'am, but I felt someone watching." Jameson appeared, frowning. "I heard it too. Everything all right?" Henry joined them, arming himself with the poker. "Stay alert. Could be nothing, but let's be sure." The family returned to the drawing room, unaware that the intruder had fully infiltrated their home. Hidden behind a peephole in the wall, the figure watched, blade ready, calculating their next move. The manor's shadows seemed to pulse with their presence, and the night stretched on, thick with dread. As the clock chimed 1, the family tried to settle, but the air crackled with tension. Clara whispered to Edward, "I don't think we're alone." He nodded, eyes wide, clutching a candle. Eleanor held Henry's hand, her grip tight. What if Clara's right? What if someone's here? Henry shook his head, but doubt gnawed at him. The manor, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, somewhere in its hidden veins. The intruder waited, their plan unfolding. The first strike was moments away, and the Whitmores had no idea how close death stood. The wind howled louder, masking the faint creak of a panel sliding open. In the darkness, the intruder's eyes gleamed with purpose, their blade a silent promise of chaos. The manor held its breath, and the terror began. The clock in Whitmore Manor's grand hall struck midnight, its chimes reverberating like a warning through the stone corridor. The family had retired to their rooms, clinging to the fragile hope that the night's unease was just the manor's usual groans. Henry had checked every lock, his rational mind battling the growing dread in his chest. Eleanor tucked Clara into bed, her soothing words masking her own fear. Edward, restless, read by candlelight, while the servants, Jameson, Mrs. Hargrove, Lily, and Anne settled in their quarters. But within the manor's hidden passages, the intruder moved with lethal precision, a shadow fueled by years of festering intent. Their blade, still clean but hungry, glinted in the faint light filtering through cracks in the walls. The Whitmore's sanctuary was now a hunting ground, and the first strikes were about to shatter their fragile peace. In the servants' quarters, Lily and Anne shared a cramped room, their whispers barely audible over the wind rattling the windows. "This place gives me the creeps," Anne said, brushing her hair. "I swear, I saw someone in the garden earlier, tall, like a goat." Lily laughed nervously, pulling the blanket over her shoulders. "Just the wind and your imagination. Old houses play tricks." They blew out their candle, the room plunging into darkness. In the hidden passage behind their wall, the intruder listened,
ear pressed to the girl's breathing slowed, signaling sleep. With a gentle push, a panel slid open, and the figure stepped into the room, silent as death. Moonlight spilled through the window, catching the blade's edge as it hovered over Lily's back. A swift motion, a muffled gasp. Blood soaked the sheets, dark and spreading. Anne stirred, eyes snapping open. She saw the cloaked figure, the blade now dripping, and opened her mouth to scream. A gloved hand clamped over her face, stifling her cry. Her struggle was brief. The intruder's strength overwhelmed her. 2 lives extinguished in moments, the manor swallowing their final breaths. Downstairs, Mrs. Hargrove, unable to sleep, shuffled to the kitchen for water. The tiles were cold under her bare feet, and she hummed softly to calm her nerves. The intruder, moving through the passages, emerged into the pantry. They peered through the kitchen door, watching her silhouette against the moonlight. The blade rose, ready to strike. Miss Hargrove turned to fill her glass, oblivious, but as the intruder stepped forward, their cloak brushed a shelf, dislodging a tin. It clattered to the floor, shattering the silence. Mrs. Hargrove spun, heart pounding. "Who's there?" The intruder froze, then retreated into the passage, the panel clicking shut. Mrs. Hargrove's hands trembled as she lit a lamp, scanning the empty kitchen. "Just the wind," she muttered, but her voice shook. She hurried to Jemison's quarters, knocking urgently. "Miss Jemison, something's wrong." Jemison, roused from polishing silver, opened his door. "What's happened?" Before she could answer, the intruder, now in a passage beneath the servants' wing, reached a new exit point. They emerged near the kitchen, faster this time, driven by the need to silence witnesses. Mrs. Hargrove's lamp flickered as she pointed toward the pantry. "I heard something, I swear." Her words became a scream as the intruder lunged from the shadows, blade slashing across her throat. Blood sprayed, staining the tiles. She crumpled, eyes wide in shock. Jemison shouted, "Intruder, help," and grabbed a knife from the counter. He swung wildly, catching the intruder's arm, but the figure was relentless. A stab to his chest sent him staggering. He collapsed, blood pooling, his final shout echoing up the stairs. The cry pierced the manor, jolting the family awake. Henry bolted from bed, grabbing a fireplace poker. "Eleanor, stay with the children," he barked, rushing into the hall. Eleanor ran to Clara's room, finding her daughter sitting up trembling. "Mama, what's happening?" "Stay quiet," Eleanor whispered, locking the door. Her hands shook as she clutched Clara close. Edward, hearing the scream, darted into the hall, meeting Henry. "Father, I heard it." "Downstairs." "Get back," Henry ordered, but the sight of the cloaked figure at the end of the corridor silenced him. The intruder's hood obscured their face, but the bloodied blade gleamed. Henry swung the poker, grazing the figure's shoulder. The intruder hissed, slashing at his arm. Pain seared through Henry as blood dripped to the floor. "Run," he yelled. Chaos erupted. Edward grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her toward the attic stairs. "Come on." Eleanor supported Henry, who clutched his wound, blood soaking his sleeve. The manor became a nightmare. Lamps toppled, casting wild shadows. Furniture overturned as the family fled. The intruder vanished into a wall panel, only to reappear ahead, blocking the main staircase. Their knowledge of the passages made them a phantom, always one step ahead. In the library, Henry barricaded a door, shoving a bookshelf against it. "Who are you?" he shouted. "What do you want?" No answer came, only the sound of scratching from the walls, like rats skittering. Eleanor's face was pale. "They know the house better than we do." Edward and Clara reached the attic, ducking behind a pile of trunks. "We need to hide," Edward whispered, his voice steady, despite his fear. Clara nodded, clutching his hand, her eyes scanning the shadows. Below, the intruder moved through the passages, their steps silent, but deliberate. They paused at a peephole, watching Henry and Eleanor in the library, plotting their next move. The family regrouped in the drawing room, hearts pounding. Henry's arm throbbed, but he tore a strip from his shirt to bind it. "We can't stay here," he said. "They're in the walls." Eleanor's eyes widened, The passages. Edward mentioned them. Could they be using those? Henry nodded grimly. Father told me stories, but I thought they were myths. If they know the passages, they could be any. A crash came from the hall. A vase shattered, deliberately knocked over. The intruder was toying with them, sowing panic. Edward whispered to Clara, "There's a way out. I saw it in the attic. A trapdoor to the roof." Eleanor overheard, her voice firm. "We need to move." Now they crept toward the attic stairs, Henry leading with the poker raised, Eleanor guiding Clara, and Edward scanning behind. The manor seemed alive, its shadows pulsing, its creaks mocking their fear. In the passages, the intruder followed, their blades still wet with blood. They knew the family's plan, knew every corner of the house, but the Whitmores weren't helpless yet. Reaching the attic, Henry found the trapdoor. Edward described. It was heavy, rusted, but it budged under his weight. Beyond it, a narrow ladder led to a small outbuilding behind the manor, a gardener's shed, long unused. "This is our way out," he said, voice low. "Hurry." Eleanor helped Clara up, her daughter's small frame trembling. Edward followed, his candle flickering. Henry went last, his wound slowing him. As they climbed, a shadow moved below, a glimpse of the intruder's cloak. The figure had reached the attic, their steps silent but close. The family emerged into the outbuilding, a cramped space filled with rusted tools and cobwebs. Henry barred the door with a shovel, but the lock was flimsy. "We're not safe yet," he panted. Eleanor clutched the children, her eyes scanning the dark. Outside, the wind howled, masking any sound of pursuit. But in the silence between gusts, Clara whispered, "They're still coming." Henry nodded, gripping the poker. The outbuilding was a temporary refuge, but the intruder's knowledge of the manor's secrets meant nowhere was truly safe. As the family caught their breath, a faint creak came from the trapdoor they'd escaped through. The intruder was close, their blade ready for the next strike. Cliffhanger. The family huddles in the outbuilding, hearts racing, as the trapdoor begins to rattle, signaling the intruder's approach.
The Whitmore family huddled in the gardener's shed, a crumbling outbuilding behind the manor, its walls lined with rusted tools and sagging shelves. Moonlight filtered through a cracked window, casting jagged shadows that seemed to writhe with menace. Henry, clutching his bloodied arm, leaned against the flimsy door, the shovel he'd used to bar it trembling under his weight. Eleanor held Clara close, her daughter's wide eyes fixed on the trapdoor they'd escaped through, its faint rattling echoing in the silence. Edward, gripping a rusted trowel he'd found, stood beside his father, his young face set with determination. The air was thick with dust and fear, the wind outside howling like a chorus of ghosts. The intruder was close, too close, and the family knew their refuge was temporary. The manor's secrets, once mere stories, now threatened to bury them. Henry's wound throbbed, the makeshift bandage soaked red, but he forced himself to focus. "We can't stay here long," he whispered, voice hoarse. "They know the passages. They'll find us." Eleanor nodded, her auburn hair clinging to her sweat-dampened forehead. "How do they know so much? It's like they've lived here." Clara's voice trembled. "The footsteps in the walls. I heard them before tonight. They've been here." Edward's eyes lit up despite the terror. "The letters in the attic. They mentioned tunnels. Maybe there's a map or something." Before Henry could respond, a sharp creak came from the trapdoor. The family froze, hearts pounding. The rattling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt heavier than the noise. Then a soft thud, like boots, landing on wood. The intruder was in the passage mere feet away, separated by rotting planks and a rusted lock. "We need to move," Eleanor urged, pulling Clara toward a narrow door leading outside. "There's a path to the stables. We can hide there." Henry hesitated, glancing at the trapdoor. "If we run, they'll hear us. We need a plan." As they whispered, a new sound broke the tension. Footsteps, not from the trapdoor, but from the path outside, heavy, deliberate, approaching the shed. The family exchanged panicked glances. "Another one," Edward whispered, gripping the trowel tighter. The door rattled, then burst open, revealing Jameson, the butler, bloodied but alive. His shirt was torn, a gash across his chest oozing red, but his eyes burned with resolve. "Thank God you're here," he gasped, staggering inside. "I fought them off, but they're still in the manor." "Jameson," Eleanor rushed to support him, easing him onto a crate. "How did you escape?" "They thought I was dead," he panted, wincing. "Got me in the kitchen, but I crawled out through the coal chute. Saw you head this way." Henry's jaw tightened. "What do they want? Why us?" Jameson's face darkened. "The manor's secrets. I've served here 30 years, sir. And your father, he told me things. The passages, they're older than the house, built for smuggling, hiding. Someone's been using them, watching you." Clara shivered. "Who, Jameson? Who's doing this?" He shook his head, pain clouding his eyes. "I don't know their face, but they move like they own the place. They know every turn, every panel." Edward's voice cut through. "The attic letters. They mentioned a map of the passages. If we can find it, we can figure out how they're moving." Henry nodded, his scholar's mind latching onto the idea. "The study. My father's journals are there. He documented everything about this place. If there's a map, it'll be with them." Eleanor's eyes darted to the trapdoor, silent now but ominous. "The study's back in the manor. It's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Henry said. "If we stay here, they'll corner us. If we know the passages, we can outmaneuver them." Jameson coughed, blood flecking his lips. "There's a way back in, through the cellar. A passage from the shed leads there. Your father showed me once. In case of emergency." The family exchanged glances, the weight of the decision pressing down. The manor, now a death trap, held their only hope. "Lead the way," Henry said, helping Jameson up. Jameson pointed to a rusted grate in the shed's floor, half hidden under a pile of sacks. Edward and Henry cleared it, revealing a narrow tunnel, its walls damp and moss-slicked. The air smelled of earth and decay, but it was their only path. Eleanor lit a lantern from the shed, its weak glow barely piercing the darkness. "Stay close," she whispered to Clara, who clung to her hand. Jameson went first, his injuries slowing him, but his memory sharp. The tunnel was claustrophobic, forcing them to crouch, the ceiling brushing their heads. Cobwebs clung to their faces, and the distant drip of water echoed like a heart. Edward whispered, "This must connect to the main passages. They're like veins in the house." After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into the manor's cellar, a cavernous space filled with barrels and crates. The air was colder here, the silence oppressive. Jameson pointed to a stone wall, where a loose brick revealed a hidden latch. "This leads to the main passages," he said. "The study's not far." They entered the passage, the lantern casting flickering shadows. The walls were lined with ancient wood, some panels carved with faded symbols, runes or markers from the manor's smuggling days. Henry traced one, his scholar's curiosity piqued. "Despite the danger, these are old, older than the Whitmore." As they moved, a faint noise like a boot scuffing stone came from behind. The intruder was in the passages, tracking them. Eleanor's breath hitched. "They're close. Keep moving," Henry urged, his poker raised. The passage twisted, branching into multiple paths. Jameson hesitated, then chose one leading upward. "This should take us to the study." They emerged behind a bookcase in the study, its shelves packed with leather-bound journals and maps. Henry barred the door, while Edward and Clara searched the desk. Edward said, pulling out a dusty journal, labeled Manor Plans. Inside was a folded parchment, a map of the passages.
their roots snaking through the walls like a spider's web. Henry studied it, his finger tracing lines. Look, exits to the attic, the cellar, even the stables. They've been using these to move unseen. Eleanor's eyes widened as she read over his shoulder. There's a note here. In your father's hand. Beware the shadow of our blood. What does that mean? Jameson, leaning against the desk, coughed weakly. Your father. He spoke of a family grudge. A distant relative, wronged long ago. He feared they'd return. Clara's voice was small. You mean their family? Before anyone could answer, a panel in the wall slid open with a soft click. The family spun, the lantern's light catching the glint of a blade. The intruder stood there, cloaked and silent, their hood hiding all but the cold gleam of their eyes. Henry raised the poker, but the figure didn't move, as if savoring the moment. Stay back, Eleanor shouted, pushing Clara behind her. The intruder tilted their head, then retreated into the passage, the panel closing, but their presence lingered, a promise of return. The map trembled in Henry's hands. They're toying with us, he said. They know we're here. Edward pointed to the map. There's another way out, through the west wing. It leads to the stables. We can get help. Henry nodded, but his eyes were on the panel. They're not just after us. They want something in this house, something tied to our blood. The family gathered their courage, clutching the map. They moved toward the west wing passage, the lantern's light, their only guide. Behind them, the manor's shadows seemed to close in, and the faint sound of footsteps followed, growing loud. Cliffhanger. As the family enters the west wing passage, the map reveals a hidden room marked Whitmore Vault, and the footsteps behind them stop abruptly, replaced by a low, chilling laugh. The Whitmore family crept through the narrow passage, toward the west wing, the lantern's feeble glow casting trembling shadows on the damp stone walls. Henry led, clutching the blood-stained poker, his wounded arm throbbing, but ignored in the face of survival. Eleanor held Clara's hand tightly, her daughter's breath shallow and quick. Edward followed, gripping the folded map of the manor's secret passages, its inked lines their only guide. Jameson, weakened by his chest wound, brought up the rear, his labored breathing echoing in the confined space. The map had revealed a path to the stables, a potential escape, but the chilling laugh they'd heard moments ago lingered in their minds, a reminder that the intruder was never far. The manor's secrets were unraveling, and the clue about a Whitmore vault hinted at a motive tied to their bloodline. Time was running out, and the family knew they had to act before the hunter became the hunted. The passage twisted, its air thick with mold and the faint metallic scent of blood, perhaps from Jameson, perhaps from the earlier carnage. The walls, etched with faded runes, seemed to pulse with the manor's dark history. Henry paused at a fork, consulting the map. This way, he whispered, pointing left. It leads to the west wing, near the stables. Eleanor's voice was tight. That laugh. They're playing with us. Henry, they know these tunnels better than we do. They're human, Henry said, though doubt crept into his tone. We have the map now. We can outsmart them. Clara's eyes darted to the shadows. What's the Whitmore vault? The map marked it, but it's not labeled like the other rooms. Jameson, leaning against the wall, coughed weakly. Your father mentioned it once, sir, he said to Henry. A hidden room, built by your great-grandfather, said it held family treasures. Not gold, but something dangerous. He never told me more. Edward's curiosity flared. Maybe that's what they're after. Something in the vault. Before Henry could respond, a distant thud echoed through the passage, like a door slamming shut. The family froze, the lantern flickering, as Eleanor's hand trembled. They're close, she whispered. We keep moving, Henry said, urging them forward. The passage opened into a wider chamber, its walls lined with rotting shelves, holding forgotten crates. A rusted ladder led to a panel above, marked on the map, as the West Wing exit. As they climbed, the air grew colder, and the manor's oppressive silence pressed down. They emerged behind a tapestry in the West Wing's hallway, the air heavy with dust and the faint scent of wax from long extinguished candles. The stables were close, but the manor felt alive with threat. Henry barred the panel with a crate, though he knew it wouldn't hold long. "We need help," he said. "The village is a mile away. If we reach the stables we can take the horses." Eleanor nodded, but her eyes scanned the hall. "What if they're waiting for us?" A sharp knock interrupted them. From the front door far across the manor, 3 deliberate raps, echoing through the silent house. The family exchanged glances. "Who could that be at this hour?" Edward whispered. Henry gripped the poker. "Stay here. I'll check." "No," Eleanor said, grabbing his arm. "We stay together." Reluctantly, Henry agreed. They moved cautiously through the West Wing, avoiding the main corridors where the intruder had struck before. The knocks came again, louder, insistent. Reaching the grand hall, they saw a figure through the frosted glass of the front door. A tall man in a long coat, his face obscured by a hat. Henry hesitated, then called out, "Who's there?" "Inspector Graves." Eldridge Constabulary, came a gruff voice. "Heard reports of trouble." "Open the door." Relief washed over Eleanor, but Henry's eyes narrowed. "How do we know it's not a trap?" Jameson, swaying from blood loss, nodded toward the door. "Graves is known in the village. Let him in, sir. But be cautious." Henry unlocked the door, poker ready. Inspector Graves stepped inside. A broad man with a weathered face and sharp grey eyes. His coat was damp from the mist, and he carried a lantern and a revolver. "Whitmore, is it?" he said, scanning the family. "Got a call from a villager. Saw lights flickering in your windows. Heard screams. What's happened?" Henry recounted the night's horrors. The murders of Miss Hargrove, Lily and Anne, the intruder's attacks, the hidden passages. Graves listened, his expression grim. "Sounds like a calculated job. Someone with a grudge and knowledge of this place." He examined Jameson's wound, then turned to the family. "Show me where it started. I need to see the scene." They led him to the kitchen, where Mrs. Hargrove's body lay in a pool of blood, her eyes frozen in terror. Graves knelt, inspecting the slash across her throat. Clean cut. They're skilled with a blade, not random. In the servants' quarters, the bodies of Lily and Anne told a similar story: swift, precise strikes. Graves traced the bloodstains, noting scuff marks near a wall panel. "They're using the passages." "All right. You said you have a map." Edward handed it over, and Graves studied it, his brow furrowing. "This is extensive. Smugglers' tunnels likely. Whoever's doing this has planned it for years." Eleanor's voice shook. Jameson mentioned a family grudge. The map marked a Whitmore vault. "Could that be what they're after?" Graves nodded slowly. "Possible. Old families like yours often have secrets, debts, betrayals. I've seen it before. We need to find that vault and set a trap." Henry's scholar's mind clicked into gear. "The stud. My father's journals might say more about the vault." We were interrupted before we could search fully. Graves agreed. "We'll start there. But we move as a unit. No one splits off." They returned to the study, barricading the door. Henry and Edward rifled through journals, finding one with a cryptic entry. "The vault holds our shame. Sealed by blood. Only a Whitmore can open it." A rough sketch showed a room beneath the central hall, accessible through a passage marked by a crest. Graves traced the central hall's exposed, but we can use the passages to get there unseen. If we control the tunnels, we can turn the tables. Eleanor looked at Clara, who clung to her. "What if they're already there?" "Then we're ready," Graves said, checking his revolver. "You lot stay behind me." "Jameson, can you manage?" The butler nodded, though his face was pale. "I'll do what I can, sir." They planned their move. Graves would lead, using the map to navigate to the vault's passage. Henry and Eleanor would protect the children, while Jameson would watch for ambushes. Edward, despite his youth, insisted on helping, memorizing the map's key points. "I can guide us if we get lost," he said, owning a proud but worried look from Henry. As they prepared, Graves analyzed the intruder's attack. "They're methodical, striking the servants first, to isolate you, then targeting you in the open. They want you scared, scattered, but they've made a mistake. They've shown they're after something specific. That vault's the key." He marked observation points on the map, places to watch the intruder's movements. "We'll set traps, loose panels, noisemakers. If they're in the passages, we'll hear them." The family nodded. Steeling themselves, they re-entered the passage, Graves leading with his revolver drawn. The air grew colder as they descended toward the central hall, the map guiding them to a hidden stair. Every creak, every drip of water, set their nerves on edge. Clara whispered, "They're still out there. I can feel it." Graves paused, raising a hand. A faint scuff came from ahead, like a boot on stone. He motioned for silence, peering into the darkness. The passage curved, hiding what lay beyond. His lantern caught a shadow, brief, fleeting, but unmistakable. "They're moving," he whispered. "They know we're in the passages. They're heading for the vault." Cliffhanger. As the family and Graves approach the central hall's passage, a panel creaks open ahead, and the intruder's cloaked silhouette appears, blade raised, blocking their path to the vault.
The Whitmore family and Inspector Graves crept through the manor's secret passage, the air thick with the stench of mold and the weight of impending danger. The lantern's dim glow flickered on the stone walls, casting caustic shadows that seemed to mock their every step. Henry, gripping the bloodied poker, led with a grim determination, his wounded arm a dull ache beneath the makeshift bandage. Eleanor held Clara's hand, her daughter's small fingers trembling but resolute. Edward, clutching the map of the manor's passages, scanned the inked lines, his young mind racing to memorize their path to the central hall and the mysterious Whitmore vault. Jameson, pale and unsteady from his chest wound, trailed behind, his labored breaths a constant reminder of the night's toll. The intruder's chilling silhouette, glimpsed moments ago with blade raised, had vanished into the passage's curve, but their presence lingered, like a noose tightening around the family. The vault was close, and with it the promise of answers, or death. Graves, revolver in hand, signaled for silence as they neared the central hall's passage. His grey eyes, sharp under the brim of his hat, scanned the darkness. "They're ahead," he whispered. "Stay tight, no sudden moves." Henry nodded, his voice low. "The map shows a stair to the vault just beyond this turn. If they're after it, they'll be waiting." Eleanor's grip on Clara tightened. "What's in the vault, Henry? Why risk all this?" "I don't know," he admitted, glancing at the journal tucked in his coat. "Father's note said it holds our shame. Whatever it is, it's tied to the family. And this intruder," Jameson coughed, leaning against the wall. "Your father feared this day, sir. Said the vault's key was blood, a Whitmore's blood." Edward's eyes widened. "You mean one of us has to open it?" Before anyone could answer, a faint scrape echoed from ahead, like metal on stone. Graves raised his revolver, motioning them back. "They're setting a trap or forcing us forward. Either way, we're ready." He'd marked the passage earlier with makeshift noisemakers, loose panels rigged to creak, strings tied to clatter if disturbed. Now, they listened for any sign of the intruder's movements. The family had rehearsed their roles. Henry and Graves would lead, Eleanor and the children would stay central, and Jameson would watch the rear. Clara, though terrified, had been taught to stay silent, her wide eyes alert for shadows. Edward, clutching a small knife he'd found in the study, was ready to guide them if the map's path faltered. Graves crept forward, lantern low, his revolver trained on the passage's curve. The map showed a narrow stair descending to the vault, hidden beneath the central hall's floor. As they rounded the bend, the air grew colder, the walls tighter, as if the manor itself was closing in. A faint glow flickered ahead, not their lantern but another light, moving. "They're there," Graves hissed, near the vault's entrance. Henry tightened his grip on the poker. "We can't let them get inside first." Graves nodded, pointing to a side passage on the map. "This loops around. We can flank them, catch them off guard." The family moved swiftly, slipping into the side passage. It was narrower, the ceiling brushing their heads, cobwebs clinging to their faces. Clara stifled a whimper as a spider skittered across her hand. Eleanor whispered, "You're brave, darling. Stay strong." The passage opened into a small chamber, its walls carved with the same ancient runes Henry had noticed earlier. In the center, a stone slab bore the Whitmore crest, a raven clutching a key. Graves knelt, tracing the slab's edges. "This must be the vault's door. The map marks it here." Henry opened the journal, rereading his father's note. "Sealed by blood, opened by blood." He frowned. A blood sacrifice, or something else? Jameson, swaying, pointed to a groove in the slab. "There's a slot. Looks like it needs a key, but not a metal one. Your father said the vault only opens for a true Whitmore." Edward's voice was urgent. "What if the intruder's a Whitmore?" That laugh, it felt personal. Graves's eyes narrowed. "Then they're here for more than revenge. They want what's inside." A sudden clatter broke the tension. One of Graves's noisemakers triggered in the main passage. The intruder was moving, their steps deliberate, but swift. Graves motioned to the slab. "We open it now, or they do." Henry hesitated, then pricked his finger with Edward's knife, letting a drop of blood fall into the groove. The slab rumbled, dust falling as it slid aside, revealing a dark stair descending into blackness. The air that rose was stale, heavy with the scent of secrets long buried. "Stay close," Graves said, leading with his revolver. The family followed, the lantern barely piercing the gloom. The stair spiraled down, ending in a small chamber. Its walls were lined with shelves holding sealed boxes, old ledgers, and a single, ornate chest etched with the Whitmore crest. Clara gasped. "Is that the treasure?" Henry opened a ledger, scanning faded entries. "These are records, debts, betrayals. A feud from a century ago. A Whitmore ancestor cheated a cousin out of an inheritance tied to this vault." Graves opened the chest, revealing a bundle of letters and a small locked box. "This is what they're after. Proof of the feud, maybe more." Before they could read further, a shadow loomed at the chamber's entrance. The intruder stood on the stair, cloak bellowing, blade glinting. Their hood still hid their face, but their voice, low, venomous, cut through the silence. "You shouldn't have opened it." Graves raised his revolver, but the intruder hurled a knife, grazing his shoulder. He grunted, firing a shot that echoed deafeningly, the bullet striking stone. The intruder ducked into the shadows, vanishing up the stair. "They're circling back," Graves said, clutching his shoulder. "We've got the vault, but they're not done." Henry grabbed the letters and box, stuffing them into his coat. "We need to get to the stables. Get help." Eleanor nodded, pulling Clara close. "But they're between us and the exit." Edward pointed to the map. "There's another passage behind the chest. It leads to the central hall." Graves rigged a trap, string tied to a crate, set to fall if the intruder returned. "That'll slow them. Move." They squeezed through the passage, the chest's contents rattling in Henry's coat. The tunnel was tight, forcing them to crawl, the air thick with dust. Behind them a crash signaled the trap's trigger. The intruder was close, undetected. They emerged in the central hall, its chandelier dark, the air heavy with the night's bloodshed. The stables were near, but the front door rattled, as if the intruder had circled around. Graves checked his revolver,
his face grim. They're hurting us. They know we've got what they want. Clara's voice trembled. They're going to find us. Henry knelt, meeting her eyes. We're together. We're stronger than they think. But as they moved toward the hall's exit, a panel creaked open behind them. The intruder stepped out, blade raised, their hooded gaze fixed on the family. The letters in Henry's coat seemed to burn, their secrets a magnet for the figure's wrath. Cliffhanger. The intruder advances, blade gleaming, as Graves aims his revolver, and the family braces for the confrontation in the central hall. The central hall of Whitmore Manor loomed like a cavern of shadows, the unlit chandelier swaying faintly in the draught from unseen passages. The family stood frozen, hearts pounding, as the cloaked intruder advanced from the opened panel, their blade gleaming with malicious intent. Henry clutched the poker, his wounded arm trembling but steady, the bundle of letters, and the locked box from the vault, heavy in his coat. Eleanor shielded Clara, her eyes fierce despite her fear, while Edward gripped his small knife, the map of the passages tucked into his pocket. Inspector Graves, revolver raised, stood between the family and the intruder, blood seeping from the graze on his shoulder. Jameson, barely upright, leaned against a pillar, his face pale but resolute. The air crackled with tension, the manor's walls seeming to lean in, as if eager to witness the clash. The intruder's hooded gaze burned with purpose, their steps silent, but deliberate, a predator closing in on prey that had dared to uncover their prize. Graves's voice was steady, his revolver trained on the figure. Drop the blade, you're outnumbered. The intruder paused, their head tilting, as if amused. Their voice, low and venomous, slithered through the silence. Outnumbered? You're rats in a maze, and I built the walls. Henry stepped forward, poker raised. What do you want? The vault, the letters, tell us. The intruder's eyes glinted. Beneath the hood, you opened what was mine. Blood for blood, Whitmore. Before anyone could react, the intruder lunged, not at Graves but at Henry, blade slashing toward his chest. Graves fired, the shot deafening, but the figure twisted, the bullet grazing their cloak and embedding in the wall. Henry swung the poker, catching the intruder's arm, forcing them to drop the blade. It clattered to the floor, but the intruder was relentless, tackling Henry with a force that sent them both crashing into a table, splintering wood. Eleanor screamed, pulling Clara back, while Edward darted forward, slashing at the intruder's leg with his knife. The figure hissed, kicking Edward aside, but the boy's attack gave Henry a moment. Scramble free, grabbing the dropped blade. Graves fired again, missing, as the intruder rolled into the shadows, vanishing behind a pillar. They're heading for the passage, Graves shouted, reloading his revolver. We can't let them regroup. Henry, panting, clutched the intruder's blade, its handle cold and unfamiliar. The map. Edward, where's the closest passage? Edward fumbled for the map, pointing to a panel near the staircase. Then it loops back to the vault, or the west wing. Graves motioned to the family. We stick to the plan, corner them. They're after those letters. We use that. Eleanor, holding Clara, whispered, what's in them? Why are they worth all? Henry opened the bundle, scanning a letter by the lantern's light. The faded ink told a story of betrayal. A century ago, a Whitmore ancestor, Charles, had cheated his cousin, Elias, out of a vast inheritance, sealing it in the vault. Elias had sworn revenge, his descendants carrying the grudge. This is personal, Henry said, voice grim. They're a Whitmore, or claim to be. Jameson, swaying, pointed to the locked box. That's the key. Your father said it holds proof. Something Elias's line has hunted for generations. Graves nodded, rigging another trap. A loose floorboard tied to a candelabrum, set to crash if disturbed. We move to the passage. Draw them out. They're wounded now, desperate. The family entered the passage, Graves leading, his revolver ready. The tunnel was narrow, the air heavy with dust, and the faint coppery scent of blood. The map guided them toward a junction where the passages split. One path to the vault, another to the west wing. Graves chose the vault path, suspecting the intruder would return for the box. "They know we have it," he said. "They'll come to us." As they moved, the manor's silence was shattered by a crash. The candelabrum trap triggered. The intruder was close, their footsteps echoing faintly. Clara whispered, "They're not giving up." Edward's eyes scanned the map. "There's a dead-end chamber ahead. We could trap them there." Graves agreed, directing them to the chamber. A small room lined with crates and old portraits. They barricaded the entrance with debris, leaving only one way in. Henry clutched the box, its weight a burden of family sin. "If they want it, they'll have to come through us." The family waited, the lantern's light flickering. Jameson, weakening, sat against a crate, his breathing shallow. "I've served your family my whole life," he said to Henry. "If I die tonight, I die protecting you." "You're not dying," Henry said fiercely, though fear gnawed at him. A shadow flickered at the chamber's entrance. The intruder appeared, cloak torn, blood seeping from their leg where Edward's knife had struck. They held a new blade, stolen from the manor's walls, a decorative dagger. Their voice was a snarl. "Give me the box, or I carve it from you." Graves fired, but the intruder ducked, hurling a crate that knocked the revolver from his hand. Henry lunged, swinging the poker, but the intruder parried with the dagger, sparks flying. Eleanor pushed Clara and Edward behind a crate, shouting, "Stay down." The fight was brutal, a dance of desperation. In the cramped chamber, Henry landed a blow, staggering the intruder, but they retaliated, slashing his shoulder. Blood sprayed, and Henry fell back, gasped. Graves tackled the figure, pinning them against the wall, but the intruder was slippery, breaking free and kicking Graves to the ground. Edward, seeing his father falter, grabbed a crate and hurled it, catching the intruder's back. They stumbled, giving Graves time to retrieve his revolver. "Enough," he roared, aiming at the intruder's chest. "Drop it, or I end this now." The intruder froze, their breathing ragged. Slowly they lowered the dagger, but their eyes never left the box in Henry's coat. "You don't know what you're protecting." The Whitmores accursed. "That box proves it." Clara's voice, small but clear, cut through. "Why do you hate us?" The intruder's hood shifted, revealing a glimpse of a scarred jaw. "Because your blood stole everything from mine." Before they could say more, a creak came from the passage. Another noise, not their trap. Graves' eyes widened. "They're not alone." The intruder seized the moment, diving for the passage, but Henry tackled them, pinning them to the floor. The box fell skittering across the stone. Eleanor grabbed it, clutching at her chest. The intruder thrashed, their strength fading, but their eyes burned with obsession. Graves retrieved his revolver, aiming at the figure. "Who's with you? Talk." The intruder laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You'll see, this isn't over." A louder crash echoed from the passage, followed by footsteps, heavy, multiple. The family exchanged panicked glances. The intruder's accomplice, or something worse, was come. Cliffhanger. As Henry holds the intruder down, the footsteps grow louder, and a new shadow appears at the chamber's entrance, raising the specter of a greater threat.
The cramped chamber beneath Whitmore Manor pulsed with dread, the air thick with dust, and the coppery tang of blood. Henry pinned the cloaked intruder to the cold stone floor, his wounded arms screaming in protest as he held the figure's wrists, their stolen dagger glinting nearby. Eleanor clutched the locked box from the Whitmore vault to her chest, its weight a silent accusation of the family's buried sins. Clara and Edward crouched behind a crate, their young faces pale but resolute, while Inspector Graves, revolver in hand, stood ready, his shoulder bleeding from the earlier graze. Jameson, slumped against a wall, fought to stay conscious, his chest wound staining his shirt crimson. The intruder's bitter laugh still echoed, their words, "This isn't over," hanging like a curse The heavy footsteps approaching from the passage grew louder, a new shadow looming at the chamber's entrance. The family braced for what might emerge, unsure if it was an accomplice or something worse, as the manor's secrets threatened to consume them all. Graves aimed his revolver at the passage, his voice sharp. "Show yourself, now." The footsteps stopped, and a figure stepped into the lantern's flickering light. Not another cloaked attacker, but a tall man in a tattered coat, his face weathered and scarred. He held a lantern of his own, and a rusty crowbar dangled from his hand. "Don't shoot," he said, voice gravelly. "I'm Thomas, groundskeeper from Eldridge. Heard screams from the village, saw lights, came to help." Henry, still pinning the intruder, exchanged a wary glance with Graves. "How do we know you're not with them?" Thomas raised his hands, dropping the crowbar. "I've worked these lands for years. Your father hired me, Mr. Whitmore. I know the manor's reputation. Cursed, they say. I came to check." Graves lowered his revolver slightly but kept it ready. "Stay where you are. We've got enough trouble." The intruder struggled under Henry's grip, their hood slipping further, revealing a scarred cheek and a woman's sharp features. Her eyes burned with hatred. "You can't stop it," she spat. "The truth will out." Eleanor, clutching the box, stepped forward. What's in here that's worth all this blood?" The intruder's gaze locked on the box. "Proof of your family's theft." "My family," Elias Whitmore's line, "was robbed of everything. That box holds the deed, the will, the proof that this manor, this land was ours." Henry tightened his grip, his scholar's mind piecing it together. "You're a descendant of Elias. The feud, it's been a century. Longer," she snarled. "Every generation. We were taught to hate you, to reclaim what's ours. I learned the passages, the vault, everything. Tonight, I end it." Graves motioned to Thomas. "Help me secure her." Thomas hesitated, then stepped forward, producing rope from his coat. Together they bound the intruder's hands, her struggles weakening from her wound. Her name, she revealed under duress, was Margaret, a distant cousin, raised on tales of betrayal. Edward, peering from behind the crate, held up the bundle of letters. "These say Charles Whitmore forged the will. Cheated, Elias. Is that true, father?" Henry nodded grimly, opening the box with a small key found among the letters. Inside was a brittle document, a will dated 1798, naming Elias as the rightful heir to the manor and its lands. Another paper, Charles's confession, admitted the forgery, sealed away to hide the shame. "It's true," Henry said, voice heavy. "Our family built its wealth on a lie." Eleanor's eyes softened. "But we didn't know. We can make this right." Margaret laughed bitterly. "Too late. Blood's been spilled. You'll never wash it clean." The chamber grew quiet, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Graves, checking the passage, confirmed no other threats approached. "We need to get to the village. Alert the authorities. This ends tonight." They dragged Margaret to the central hall, her bound hands making her less a threat, but no less venomous. The hall, scarred from the night's chaos, shattered vases, bloodstains on the floor, felt like a battlefield. Thomas helped Jameson to his feet, the butler's strength fading, but his loyalty unbroken. "I'll see this through, sir," he whispered to Henry. Using the map, they navigated back to the main entrance, avoiding the passages where Margaret's knowledge had given her the edge. The front door loomed, freedom just beyond, but Graves paused, revolver still drawn. She said, "The truth will out." "What if there's more?" Henry looked at Margaret, her eyes defiant. "Is there another? Were you alone?" She smirked, silent. Clara, trembling but brave, stepped forward. "She was alone. I felt it. The house only had one shadow tonight." Graves nodded, trusting the girl's instinct. They stepped into the night, the mist curling around the manor, like a shroud. Thomas led them to his cart, parked near the stables, and they loaded Jameson and Margaret inside.
The village was a mile away, its lights faint through the fog. As they rode, Henry held the box, its contents a heavy burden. Eleanor leaned close, whispering, "We'll make it right. For Elias. For her." The manor receded behind them, its spires stark against the sky. In the village, constables took Margaret into custody, her curses echoing. As she was led away, Jameson was rushed to a doctor, his survival uncertain, but his courage undeniable. Graves documented everything: the bodies, the vault, the letters, ensuring the truth would be recorded. Back at the manor, days later, the family began to heal. Henry, his wounds bandaged, pored over the will, consulting lawyers to trace Elias's descendants and offer reparations. Eleanor tended to Clara and Edward, their bravery alight in the darkness. The manor stood scarred but intact, its passages sealed, its secrets laid bare. Clara, once timid, now walked its halls with quiet strength, while Edward sketched the passages, vowing to know every corner to prevent another nightmare. Graves visited one last time, his report filed. "You've got a strong family," he said to Henry. "Most would have broken." Henry nodded, looking at Eleanor and the children. "We learned what matters: courage, strategy, survival." The manor's shadows no longer felt alive, but its history lingered, a reminder of blood and redemption. The Whitmores, scarred but whole, faced the future, their bond forged in the crucible of that horrific night. Resolution: the family survives, the intruder's motives exposed as a century-old grudge. The manor's secrets are revealed, and the Whitmores begin to right their ancestors' wrong, finding strength in their unity and courage. As the mist settled over Whitmore Manor, the scars of that fateful night remained etched in its stone walls and in the hearts of the Whitmore family. The truth of their ancestors' betrayal, uncovered in blood and shadow, had shattered the illusion of their legacy, but it also forged a new strength within them. Henry, Eleanor, Edward, and Clara emerged not just as survivors, but as a family bound by courage and resolve, determined to right the wrongs of the past. The manor, once a labyrinth of secrets, stood silent, its hidden passages sealed, its ghosts laid to rest. Yet, as the family rebuilt their lives, a faint whisper lingered in the air, a reminder that some shadows never fully fade. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through Whitmore Manor. If you felt the suspense, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What secrets do you think still hide in the shadows? Until next time, stay brave, and keep exploring the unknown.